from the AP, but he said it's
Special
an exception of the rule.
Okay,
Yeah.
so this was in Daf Yomi not long ago, which is why it came to mind.
It's like so loud.
And cold.
Maybe you can close that door.
Oh, you can't even now, usually. Melech Mashiach. Lo Elam, Lo Ed.
So the Gemara says in Chullin, Anun Cheist Amud Beis. So it wants to talk about, the Gemara is talking about the fact that there's no creature that doesn't have a vertebra, meaning it doesn't have a Amud Shidra, it doesn't have a spine, that can live for more than a year. And then one of those creatures says, Rav, Amar Rav, Leit Baka Bar Yoma, Veleit Didva Batshata. So it says, Rav says, there's no, Baka apparently is a yatush. It's a mosquito, according to Rashi. Means vuv tzinsa, says Rashi. And tzinsa is very close to how you say mosquito in Italian. Why is that the word that they used in France at the time? I don't know. But it probably means a mosquito. So there's no mosquito that's more than a day old. Velei didva, and there's no fly but shata, that's more than a year old. Amar le Rav Papa le Abaye, says Rav to Abaye, ve'amre inshei, there's a well-known saying, Shav shnei im rabakta mebaka. This is a strange saying that they used to say, but I guess it's a play, it's a lashon nofel al lashon. It's like, so 7 years the female mosquito was angry at the male mosquito. She was everybody's here married, right? She wouldn't speak to him for 7 years. Why? The Amrale, she told him, Chazite lebar mechuza de sacha b'maya. You saw a man from Mechuza, from the Ir Mechuza, right, in Bavel. And he was traveling in the water. V'salik vichach b'sdinin. And he got out of the water and he put a towel on. V'otivat alei. And you, the male mosquito, flew on him and you sat on him. Umatzat minei velo datli. And you stung him, right? And you pulled out his blood and you didn't tell me. Okay. Okay. So that's why it's a kasha on him. He says they don't live more than a year. She was angry at him for 7 years.
More than a day.
Well, he said there's none that lives more than a day, but at least we all agree that was somebody else. But in any case, we all agree that they don't live more than a year. So how can you say they don't live more than a year? Here for 7 years she was angry at him. So obviously right away, what's the answer?
Doesn't mean 7 years.
It doesn't mean 7 years. It's a saying. A saying, you don't have to take it literally. But what is it talking about? What is this strange reality? And this mashal is trying to say something. It's trying to say something about marital affairs. Something about the relationship between a husband and wife. It's just using the yatush as the mosquito as an example. But what's it trying to say? So in the Maharsha, if you look at the Maharsha, he goes in a certain direction, which I don't want to get into, even though it connects to the next medrash after that. But there was a chacham by the name of Rabbi Yaakov Gesundheit. Sounds even funny that would be somebody, but he wrote a very serious, it was a very serious chacham in Poland in the 1700s, and he wrote one of the most important commentaries on Chullin. It's called Tiferes Yaakov. So he brings an incredible insight into this. And he says, of course, it doesn't mean that they lived for 7 years. We'll talk about that in a moment. But what is the whole situation what's the whole situation why was she angry at him? What's the reason women get angry at their husbands? Because he went somewhere and he found some really fat guy and he sucked his blood and he didn't tell her. So, what do you want? So who can guess? What is that? He found a really, really fat guy and he took from him what he could, and now she's angry at him because he didn't tell her. What did he not tell her?
The fact is a fat guy who she can suck blood also.
So either that she can suck blood also, or or
He ate dinner without telling her.
you ate dinner without him. You're getting closer.
He didn't tell her what happened to her.
So he says in incredible insight, he says, the mosquito, if he lives only a year, so how much blood does he need to suck in order to live for a year? Why was she angry at him for 7 years? Because they don't live more than a year. So why 7 years? Because the guy was so fat. The people in Mechotz are so fat, they're so full of blood. He says you can live off of one of them for 7 years. And what did he do? So he sucked what was enough for 7 years, and he didn't tell her that I have enough money, I have enough parnasa now for 7 years. What did she expect him to do? If you have that much, and what are you holding it back for? Where did he put it? Where did the mosquitoes put their savings? Who remembers? What does it say about the mosquito? That he takes in, but he doesn't spend. He doesn't put out. The idea he says is that you have to make sure that whatever you're making, whatever amount of money that you're making, that you're not saving it, hoarding it for some time after you'll live. So if you live for a year, if you need to live for a year, so that's all you need to. Anything beyond that is you have to spend. And who do you need to spend it on? Who should you give the money to? Your wife. Because what does she need it for?
Clothes, jewelry.
Yeah, she has it. She says he has enough there for much more, and he keeps it because he's the one who's making the money. So he's saving it somewhere. So first of all, if you save, don't tell anybody. That's the first maskana. You don't need to share how much you save. But really the lesson is that you shouldn't keep more than what you need. This was a big principle by the Baal Shem Tov. That whenever Shabbos would come, he'd come to the wife. We have a wife that's our common wife, that's everybody's wife. Who is it? It's Shechina. And the Shechina comes on Shabbos. So if there was any money left over in the house, what would he do? He would make sure to give it away before Shabbos started. Why? So that the wife doesn't come in and sees, wait a minute, you've got all this stuff that you saved up, and we're not using it. Why are we not using it? So, best thing is to use it in such a way that you give it to people who don't have. But in any case, don't hoard it. The moment that you start hoarding it, that's where a lot of the tension between a husband and wife starts. And it's spiritual tension. It's not. She might not even know. I said in the beginning, don't tell. But it doesn't matter whether you tell or you don't tell. Because she found out anyway. He didn't tell her that he had found this fat guy in Mechoza. But she found out anyway. How did she find out? Because they always find out. Whether you find out here or you find out here that you know something's going on, it doesn't matter. It's the same thing. Because you have to be nakim elokimu ma'adam. You have to be clean from both Hashem, who knows everything, and from people who, whatever they know. Why? Because if you're doing something spiritual that's hurting, it'll eventually affect your surroundings. And first of all, it affects your wife and your children. And so here, it seems like a pashut mashal, but I think it has a lot of implications for how we live. Because if you can't make ends meet, that's one thing. But if there's enough, and people today, they live like they're going to live for 1,000 years. Meaning there's such an understanding that you have to, or it's the opposite, that there's just spend without end. But this whole thing of that we have to save up for the children's weddings and for this and for that. I'm not telling people how to live, but I'm saying that in the end, it might be way too much, way beyond what we need. Because how should a person treat it? How should a person see his life? That I have today what I need. That was the Baal Shem Tov's way. Whatever I have today, at most, whatever I need for a week, that's all I need to keep. I don't need to keep more than that.
With all due respect, why is that a responsible attitude towards your life and finances?
So again, it's a
Like,
question
one thing
you're
is to
responsible.
hoard for
No,
500 years.
there it seems like
Plan
it's
for
way
20,
beyond.
30 like he's not supposed to live for more than a year, so he's planning for the whatever. That makes no sense. But if he was saving up for 6 months within his year, or saving up for 30 years down the line in the human sense, why would that be?
What if he doesn't live for another
Then
for
his
30 years?
family or his kids will get it done.
Okay, so that's what you think. Why can't they have their own
I'm saying
parnassus?
the mosquito is where he's saving
Way beyond what he needs. Way beyond what he needs. Okay, now we'll come to the second part, which is that here we're talking about. This is the second understanding here, that whatever you talk about, you have to see it from its perspective. So when you say that the mosquito was able to get blood for 7 years, what's that like in a person's life? If his lifetime, so right away you would say it's like 7 times what we would live. If he lives for a year and he was able to hoard for 7 years worth for
You're
seven,
winning a lot.
it's like what do you do with that? And we're not in that position, right? But that's the big question. That's the big question, because how do we approach the way that we live? Do we look at it as day by day, or do we look at it as our whole lifetime? So today there's a understanding in the world that how should it be? That it's your whole lifetime. And like you said, how can you not plan for your retirement? What does the Rebbe have to say about retirement?
Retirement doesn't mean that you have to stop working. What I mean is you want to be able to
do what?
To survive at that point.
Okay.
While working.
So why do you think you won't survive?
Because you won't work.
People
No, he says you should work. Whatever you can, you continue doing.
No, of course. But you want to be able to be. I'm just curious because I'm not understanding this point. Isn't it mashma from the mosquito that if you're saving for less than 7 times your life, so if you're saving for 1 year or 2, saying if you're saving for 1 lifetime or 2 lifetimes, that is responsible. Where is there a problem when you're doing it too much 7 times? But anything until 7 times is actually responsible.
So now let's think about it. If that's the claim, if you would come and you said, I just ate for a year's worth. Okay? I ate for a year's worth, and I didn't give you anything to his wife. What would she say?
Doesn't seem like she'd be too upset.
No, she wouldn't be upset.
Well, she understands that that's the
You
way
have
that
enough
savings
money
work.
for our whole lifetime, and you're not giving me to eat.
She got upset at the 7 years, not at 1 year.
Settle. So why is that? Because it wants to. Again, it's an exaggeration. Like they're so fat, and he got so much that it's like 7 lifetimes. But the question is, where's the mark off? Where do you start? So, at some level, you have to. It all depends on how you see things. That if you live day by day, then everything that you have beyond the day is too much, and you have to spend it in some way. You have to use it in some way. To spend is the wrong word. You have to make it work in some way. How do you make money work, or how do you make your finances work?
Invest it.
Okay, so how can you invest it? What are the different types of investment?
You just switch your
Supporting
glasses?
Torah mitzvahs investment.
So what else?
Oh.
What else? What else could it be? Apart from Torah and mitzvahs, like what do you mean when you say mitzvahs? What do you invest it in? You invested in tzedakah. Okay.
For your kids.
It's an
Tzedakah
investment.
For your kids.
So that's one option, by the way. By the way, that's very important, because you should know that after age 6, you're not chayav. So maybe today people extend it a little bit more. You're not chayav to be mefarnes them, and everything you're doing is a chesed. It's tzedakah. It's part of what is considered tzedakah. That's very important to know. But in general, you have to make it work. It shouldn't be just lying around. That's the main thing. You don't hoard it in the sense of just letting it sit there. And what it's trying to say is that the female can't stand waste. And something just lying around. There's a joke that's going around now, that what's the most endangered species in the world? You haven't heard this? It's a man sitting on his couch in the living room. Nobody spotted them for years. Because what happens? If you sit on your couch, what happens? What's the first thing that happens? Your wife comes and says, I need help with something. Why you're hoarding time now. You're just sitting there doing nothing. You've been given time. You've been given a whole lifetime. Same thing that's with money. Is the same thing with time. Time is even worth more than money. So how can you be wasting it just sitting there? You invest it. Do something with it. You have nothing to do. I have stuff in the kitchen to do. So you have to think about this, that I can't hoard my what I have, whether it's physical possessions or whether it's spiritual possessions. Also, what did the Rebbe tell us about what you know? What should you do with what you know?
Share with others.
Good. Right away. I didn't say perfect it. Wait until you know everything. I said right away. Why? Because you shouldn't be like a yetush shemachnis ve'eno motzi. You can't be like a mosquito that just takes in and doesn't take out. Because that's like a tube that doesn't have an opening on the bottom. Imagine if a person doesn't have an opening on the bottom, what do we say every time we come out of the restroom? Yishal litkayem, how long? Even 1 hour. So there's a thinking also in Yiddishkeit that it's not just a lifetime or a week like the Baal Shem Tov, or every day that Hashem gives me my parnasa. There's also an understanding that every hour I have to bring something out. The Friediger Rebbe, every hour he made sure to make a bracha. Why did he make a bracha? So the Rebbe once explained that he used to make a bracha in order to be mechaven the particular permutation of Yud Kei Vav Kei for that hour. But that's the to say a bracha, some kind of birkat hanenin, that you're enjoying something, whether it's good health or when he didn't have a bracha to say. By the way, what did he say? He said, "Baruch atah Hashem lamdeini chukecha." I think we mentioned this even last class. So last time I was here, so that he thanked Hashem for the laws of the universe, that the physical laws of the universe exist the way that they exist. Why is that? Because a bracha is to say things. Is you gave me something. I have to reflect it. I have to in some way bring it out. A human being is something that has to be open on top and open on the bottom. And things pass through us. So it's true, some of it comes out as waste, some of it is not needed. But most of it, and that's really the way that we should be, is that whatever I inject, whatever I take in, I should find a way to give it back as quickly as I can. And not to leave it sitting inside, because when it sits inside, it begins to rot. It's really, the hoarding is really a rotting process. And who's most sensitive to it? The wife. The woman is most sensitive to it. The moment she sees that you're hoarding in some way, that you're not taking out what you brought in. So for instance, you come back from the kollel, and you don't say anything from what there was, from what you learned. So what did I send you there for? What did you go for? I'm not asking you to repeat everything, but I want the point. There's always a point. It says that Mesamta Batene, when you bring Bikurim, the first fruit, so you bring it in a basket that's called a tene. So tene is Rashi Tevos, Taf, Nashim, and Nashim. Right? The children, the women, and the men. What is it also Rashi Tevos of? Tamim Nekudot Otiyot. It doesn't have the tagim. The full thing is Tanta. But in Tene, there's just Tamim Nekudot Otiyot. So the Nashim is Nekudot. Nashim and Nekudot go together. What do you mean? Tell me the point. I don't need to hear the whole thing that you learned. I just need to hear the uvchein, the point in the end. What did you get from it? If you don't bring it out, and you're just hoarding it for yourself, so what did we do here? So this is a very important lesson for how to be, and it goes in. There's a lot to be said about it from a scientific point of view, that a human being is a machine that goes against entropy. Entropy means that everything is deteriorating, everything is breaking up. What's the only way to ensure that the human body doesn't break down? You keep bringing new energy in. Somebody once said, what's the quickest way to unscramble an egg? Can you unscramble an egg once you've scrambled it? Anybody know of a way to unscramble an egg?
Cracking you.
Same egg. How can you unscramble an egg? It's very easy. It's not so difficult. You feed the egg to a chicken. It lays a new egg. So you took the energy in the egg, and it made the chicken produce a new one. So chicken is an egg unscrambling machine. That's what it does. You give it stuff, it takes eggs that are scrambled and turns them into eggs that are not scrambled. What's a human being? You take in whatever you take in and you put out something new. But if you're not putting anything out, you really can't put anything new in. That's the difference between a yatush, a mosquito, and a human being. The word yatush, we all know that it's connected to what? It's a big topic in Chassidus. The same letters, but pronounced a little bit differently. Yeshus. Yeshus means, literally, that I'm stuck with the stuff that I put in. That I don't know how to give back from what I took in. So a human being is a machine that takes stuff that's confused, is jumbled, not ordered. He puts it into his mind and he says it correctly.
Is that why they actually created mosquitoes? To blow out this point?
Can.
Really?
So it's really that's what it means in Tushk Damcha. Then understand that when it comes to creatures in the world, you should have more shiftless, more lowliness than even a yatush. Why? Why is the yatush so lowly? Because it doesn't even know how to take something. Again, that's exactly the thing that it says here in the Gemara about it not having a spine, not having a vertebra. What is a vertebra? What does it symbolize? Where does it go? From where to where does the vertebra go? From above to below. So if you're not like a tube that's open-ended on both sides, so you're not taking anything from above and bringing it below. Really, that's what I'm doing all the time. I take in something. How did the Rebbe used to say it? He says it goes in both directions. You either take from above Torah and you bring it down so that other people can understand it, or if you're taking something physical, what should you be doing with it in the other direction, elevating it? So the Rebbe used to say that a Jew is a machine that takes Gashmius and turns it into Ruchnius. And that's the other direction. But you always have to be open-ended on both sides. You can't keep it in. You can't hoard it. Don't let it, because then it collects here. When it collects here, it's no good. So the woman is very sensitive to this in some way. That needs to be explained. Why is she more sensitive than the man? The man has a tendency to do this, and she tries to keep him faithful in this sense. And it's in a strange way. It's like, because she says what? Because you didn't give me enough money for my clothing, for my jewelry, for this, for that, all the needs that I have. But the deep saying here is that the more open-ended you are on both sides, taking in and also giving out, so if you create this in a spiritual sense, so your relationship with your wife also becomes more and more spiritual. Meaning that she's willing to limit or lessen the amount of physical needs that she has in order to invest in something spiritual. So what does it mean to invest in something spiritual? It could be that there's more money for tzedakah. It would be more openness to having guests. By the way, it's one of the most difficult things in the world for a woman is to have guests over. It says Mamish that this is like Kriyas Yamsuf for them. It's one really it's like pressing down on them every time there's another person in the house, whether they say it or not.
Why?
Because it's like private. The house for the wife is more an example, is more a symbol of her most intimate self. For the man, a house is a place to entertain. It's a completely different understanding. For her to let somebody into the house is actually to let somebody into a very intimate place. So intimate, in fact, that Chazal say in Sanhedrin that you can't have a house that only has one room. You should never live in a house that only has one room. You have to live in a house that has at least a room within a room. Why? Because if you, as the Gemara says there, if you bring somebody in, if your wife feels that they're right in the middle, smack dab of your intimacy, that you're most intimate, like the Kodesh HaKodashim, so Mamish kills her. So if you ever want, and so also you have to think whether it's a good thing. You can't always guests have to be her prerogative, whether she wants to have them or not. She has to decide. But again, the more that you are open in this sense, whatever comes in, you take out. You find a way to spend it, and you don't leave it, you don't hoard it. So the more your wife also goes along with you, and also is willing to build it that way. Okay, so now let's look in the Tanya. Today's Tanya is a whole chapter, right? Chapter 33.
Okay.
Where?
33. Lamed Gimel. So we're not going to read the whole thing, but you know what? Let's read a little just to refresh our memory from this morning. Od zot tiyeh simchat hanefesh ha'amitit. So what's the true joy of the soul? ובפרט שרואה בנפשו בעיתים וזמנים שצריך לזככה ולהרע בשמחת לבב. Every person suffers from some depression from time to time. And he needs to give himself some joy. And it's up to the person to hug himself. You have to learn how to hug yourself. Nobody else in the world is going to hug you the way you need to be hugged. That's like a big principle. Nobody else is chayav to make your life good. It's up to you. There's people who think that to make my life good, I'll go shopping. So, could be. Some people it helps. But really, simchat hanefesh ha'amitit, which is what enlivens the soul and what brings back all the joy of life, azay ya'amik machshavto, the way to do it, v'yitzer b'sichlo u'vinato inyan yichudo yitbarach ha'amiti. What does it mean that Hashem is one? איך הוא ממלא כל עלמין עליונים ותחתונים, אפילו מלוא כל הארץ על הזו יכבודו, וכולה כמי כלא חשיב, והוא לבדו הוא בעליונים ותחתונים, ממש כמו שהיה כלבדו, קודם ששת ימי בראשית. So that creation is really just Hashem. Everything that we see here is part of Hashem, and before Him it's like it never existed. Everything is like it was before the 6 days of creation. Nothing changed. How can that be? וגם במקום הזה שנברא בעולם הזה השמיים והארץ וכל צבאם היה הוא לבדו ממלא המקום הזה וגם אתה כן הוא. It's still the same way. So is the world real or not real? Obviously it's real, but it's not exactly what I thought it was. So I can't walk around all day with this thought, but I can from time to time when I need to enliven myself, when I need to give myself joy, so this is the way to meditate on this. How do you meditate on this? This is only Hashem. What does it mean it's only Hashem? That everything that I see here is just Hashem. And it's exactly like it was before it was created. How can you understand it? Meaning there's no real separation from Hashem. That's really what it means. It's not that this table is not real. It's just that this table has two different ways in which it appears. It can appear the way it is now, that you can touch it and it feels like it's something real, or it can be like it was in Hashem's thought before He created it. And the truth is that by Hashem they're both the same. The way it is to us and the way it is to Hashem, from Hashem's perspective, that's what we talked about before. You have to look at things from their perspective. From Hashem's perspective, when He dreamt up this table, where was it? In a manner of speaking, where was it? In His mind. The fact that it created a table did not take it out of His mind. It's still in His mind, as it were.
It doesn't exist in His mind. We're talking about pre-creation means even before.
No. That's why He says,
right.
But before that, we have, those are 7 days. We talked about this last time. The 7 days, they're the midos. But before that, there's Chabad.
Before creation, there was no existence of, there was no table in God's mind that existed before the world was created. We're referring to
that's it's called Shi'er be'atzmo b'choach kol ma she'atid liot before. He in his mind he has a plan for everything that he's going to do.
Part of creation, though.
Nope. That's before the Shesh Temei Bereshit. Very important. Meaning I don't want to cancel everything out completely, because if I cancel everything out completely, this is nothing.
That's what we're speaking about.
Kula kamei kelo chashim means before Him it's like it doesn't exist. I'm saying in another way. He's going to give two mashalim for this. The two mashalim, the famous mashalim, are the words of speech before I say them. Where are they? Where were the letters of what I'm saying when I planned this year? Whenever I planned, if I planned. So when I planned it, where was the shir? In my mind. Could you study it then? Could you hear it then? You can't.
There was no letters there.
Hold on. There's no letters of speech yet. But there are letters of thought. Okay? So before I said it, before I'm saying it now, how could somebody else connect to it? You couldn't connect to it. There was no reality to the shir. And even now when I say it, is it any different than hopefully it's not, than what I plan to say? Well, it's still the same thing. So from my perspective, even though by a human being, the moment I say the words that are outside of me, but from my perspective, it's all in my mind. Even this whole thing, maybe I dreamt it. Maybe this is not really happening. Would it be less real for me, from my perspective? Not really. Doesn't matter really if I got a chance to say it or I didn't get a chance to say it. In any case, this was a shir with all its parts. It was already in my mind. Now I come and say it, so fine, it becomes a reality for other people. But it was always a reality for me. Now the question is, what about me, myself? Could I have a reality that's not the way I see it now as something separate from Hashem? Yes. I also have that type of real, but it's not from my perspective, it's from his perspective. So everything that's happening to me is already planned in a certain sense, it already exists. But it's what we call in Hashem's mind, what comes before Sheshes Yimei Bereishis. We'll see in a moment what this means. Okay? וגם אתה כן הוא לבדו בלי שום שינוי כלל. There's no change, nothing changed, because it's all in his mind. שכל הנבראים בטלים אצלו במציאות ממש כביטול אותיות הדיבור והמחשבה במקורן. Just as the letters, not only of speech, but also of thought, also have a source somewhere higher. But they have a source, they have a place where they came from. And when they're there, they're part of the Atzmus, part of Hashem. הוא מהות הנפש ועצמותה שהן 10 בחינותיה, חוכמה, בינה ודעת, and so on. And what is this called? So in our world, since the Atzmus for us is very difficult to attain, so we just say in general, like it is in Tanya, that Chokhmah and Bina and Das are like the Etzem HaNefesh. They're the essence of the soul. And when we speak, we bring it out. But really, in the beginning, it's just in our intellect. It's just how we think. In Hashem, there's another thing called Mamish Atzmus. But in us, it's hard for us to imagine what this Mamish Atzmus is. We can't really fathom it. In Hashem, of course, He knows what His Atzmus is. Okay? Another difference, says the Rambam, it's the beginning of the Tanya, he brings us 3 different times actually, that in us, we think something, so by us, the letters of thought are separate from us. Meaning, the shir that I thought of an hour ago is not me. And I'm holding that shir in my head. So there's me thinking, and there's what I'm thinking, right? By Hashem, says the Rambam, it's the same thing, in a way that we can't even explain. So, in any case, for us to understand what it means that something is still part of me and I haven't taken it out, it's like to say that it's in the machshava, in Chokhmah, Bina, and Das. And that was what came before the creation of the world, which is already the midos, from Chesed down to Malchus. Okay? שאין בהם בחינת אותיות עדיין קודם שמתלבשות בלבוש המחשבה. Okay. כמו שכתוב גם כן במקום אחר, משל גשמי לזה. So we have he says there's also a physical, that's the psychological mashal. The psychological mashal is that when it comes out of me, when I speak it, or even by me when I think it, because in a person the thought and the person thinking it are 2 different things. Koach HaMaskil and the Muskal, and what I'm thinking about, they're 2 separate things. But in Hashem it's all one. But there's another physical mashal for this. What's the physical mashal? The physical mashal is bitul ziv ve'or hashemesh bimkoro. That the light that comes, that emanates out of the sun, is batel in its source. So I don't know how they understood it back then. They had some understanding of it. Our understanding of it is they would love to hear this. that from Einstein and on, what this means is that that the light that emanates from the sun never leaves the sun. This doesn't sound normal, but again, from the sun's perspective, because light travels at the speed of light, it never leaves the sun. Instead, what happens? It takes from the light's perspective, it takes no time for it to get from the sun to us. Time doesn't pass because it's traveling at the speed of light. So what's happening? From our perspective, it takes 8.5 minutes. From the light beam's perspective, it takes no time. What's happening instead? It's expanding. It's not time, it's space that's expanding. It's a very confusing idea, but what it means is that whatever was in the sun never left the sun. It's still there. It's much, much closer even to what the Alter Rebbe means, the way that we understand the physics today. No, it's expanding. Space is expanding, so therefore the energy is like expanding, but it doesn't take time. It's just
to do with time, but isn't that something that essentially it's sort of like a light bulb?
No, it's not leaving the sun. The sun is just expanding.
The influence of the sun expanded.
Exactly. It's not like I throw a rock out of my hand and now the rock is there and I'm still here. As far as the sun is concerned, it never ever gave up any of its energy. Everything that we see, everything that's energized by the sun, all the heat, it's part of the sun. This is very close to what we mean when we say that this is all Hashem's still. Because from Hashem's perspective, it's like this doesn't exist autonomously the way that we feel it does. It exists. That energy exists, but it expanded out. It didn't leave. None of us are separate from Hashem. Anything that we do or are is not being separate from Hashem's perspective. From our perspective, we're separate.
Well, right, if the sun turns off, all the light disappears, so if the energy
But all at once. From the sun's point of view, if it would disappear, all the energy would.
To see that disappearance.
That's for us.
So even if, just hypothetically, but even if Hashem's energy
There's a lot of it.
stopped giving us energy to live, there could technically still be, like, what I mean is, once you start looking from the human being perspective, there is room for people to have said hundreds of years ago or thousands of years ago how now we're separate entities from, like, based on the same logic.
There's even room right now to say, because from our perspective, we're
if you're
separate.
applying the same logic, that's when you have a different perspective, there's actually practical differences where there is a time-space difference, then there is a lot of room to say
Of course.
that we're acting independently.
Right, we have no problem with it. We just say you have to understand both perspectives.
We have a big problem with that. We have to say that everything that we're not our own.
That's what he says here, that you can't do this all day long. You can't be in kula kamei kula chashiv all day long. It doesn't work. The human consciousness is not built for it. From time to time, you have to go back to this. Every time you feel depressed, every time you feel down, you're saying this is the remedy for the true joy of the soul. To go back to its source. What's my source? It's Hashem Himself. I was never separated. This never happened in the way that I understand it. I understand it like Hashem threw me down into the world. He tossed me here. Good luck. But Hashem doesn't see it that way. As far as Hashem is concerned, I'm just His thought being manifested, happening. Whatever He was thinking is now happening. Good. So it says, when you do that, you go back to this. This is like a symptom, a certain symptom of the separation. It's like symptoming ourselves, not the way Hashem did symptom, the opposite. So what is this like? The idea here is that this is like the mosquito. Going back to the mosquito. The mosquito, why does he hoard for 7 years? Why? Because what is he thinking? That I'm going to have to continue by myself for 7 years here. It's not realistic. It doesn't mean anything, but maybe I'll be separate for 7 years from my source of life. What does he not know? That if at every certain interval you go back to your source, there's nothing lacking. Because why is a person upset? Why is he? Because he feels that either I don't have what I need to have, I don't have enough, It's not working out the way I thought it should, and so on. If I can go back to bringing myself that this is all part of the divine plan, this is all what he was thinking before he created the world, it hasn't changed. It's just that I'm experiencing it as being separate. So from time to time, I have to go back to the initial state where I am just a part of Hashem's thought. That's it. That's all it is. And if I can do that, then it's like a bittul of all the things that I thought I need to hoard and I need to get and I need to obtain and I need to use and I need to do even. This is even better than, like, let's say I came to the conclusion that what I need to do in the world is I need to be open to take Torah in and to bring it down, or I need to take Gashmias and elevate it back up. But let's say it's not working the way I wanted it to. Okay? I'm learning, and no, my head is not as good as clear as I would like it to be, and I'm not getting as much as I would like to, or I'm not being invited to speak here, or I'm not being invited to speak there, or whatever a person thinks, it's not working, or I'm writing a book and nobody's learning it. Whatever it is. So what? If you're right, in order to write the book, you have to feel separate. Otherwise, you won't write the book. Because if you don't feel separate, you won't do anything. You'll just be the light rays still inside the sun. Everything's good. It's all good, man. Nothing going on here. There's nothing to see. You have to feel some separation in order to take responsibility. But you can't let that separation make you fall. So how do you get away from the falls? How do you lift yourself up when you feel this depression? You do it by, he says, from time to time, you have to have simchat nefesh amitit. You have to take the soul back into its root. And in its root, it's all good, because it's all Hashem's plan. It's all very good, the way it is. What is my real purpose in the world? To be the carrier of that particular thought. I'm the manifestation, I'm the embodiment of one particular part of Hashem's plan. And there's no greater, we didn't read the second page, he says this, that it's like, how could it be, he says the mashal is that the great king comes to live with me in my house. Achnasas orchim for the great king. That's what my life is when I think this. That everything that I'm doing is that Hashem chose me out of everybody to come dwell with me. Of course, he also chose you, he chose everybody. But that's what my life really is. That Hashem is living with me in the place that I am right now. So how could I be upset? That's the real goal. The real goal is achnasas orchim of melech malchei hamlochim. That's what I have at every moment. So whether it looks to me like it's the way I wanted it, not the way I wanted it, I feel happy about it, not happy about it. If I can return back to that source, clean out everything, all those thoughts, all the mosquito thoughts of collecting this and collecting that and being successful here and being successful there, and not losing here and not losing there, and I can clean it out, go back into my source. So when I go back into my source, it's all good. Because who am I with? I'm with Hashem, I'm with the Eibishter. I'm in Him, and He's come to live in my life.
But is that a constant understanding, or that's when you...
So it says that to mamish, you can understand this all the time, but to mamish have it in your head at this moment, he says you have to take time from time to time and go back, and it's like a reset of the whole soul, of the whole nefesh. The whole psychology of the person is different. If he takes 5 minutes every day and he does this, you don't need 5 minutes, the truth is you need a minute. But every once in a while you have to clean everything out, and I'm starting again, because it's amazing that the nefesh, like one of the biggest teachings of the Baal Shem Tov was that wherever your thought is, that's where you are. So if you just think about this for 2 minutes, that's where you are. It's not like when you want to clean a room, you have to bring water and you have to hose it down, whatever, and you have to clean it. When you want to clean the nefesh, all you have to do is you have to be in a certain state of mind. That itself is the cleansing. That itself is what resets it. So we didn't get to do the tough, the last tough in Chitas. But I was going to say that that's what happened with the Mishkan in today's Aliyah. That they had to bring everything to Moshe, and Moshe was making the Mishkan. What does that mean? The Moshe Rabbeinu, the reason that they had finished, everything was done, everything was complete. What was missing? They couldn't put it together. They didn't know how can you, le'akimoto means that there has to be a kiyum to the thing. How do you make a kiyum? So the real kiyum by Moshe is that Moshe Rabbeinu has a perspective of how it is in Hashem's plan. That's to bring things back to the Rebbe. That even after everything I did, sometimes I can't, as much as I can maybe reset myself, but I can't see it in the greater context. And to bring it back into the greater context, to see how it all fits together, how to put it all together, for that I need a Moshe Rabbeinu. So, but that was another part that probably don't have time for.
Okay.